Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you gonna see, what if Naruto had a harem with Akeno Himejima? This is part 1. And if you want more, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's get in the video and do check out the author of the story. Emptiness, that's all Naruto Uzumaki could feel as he floated aimlessly throughout a vast black void. His senses were dulled and he couldn't feel anything, which made the young knucklehead wonder if this is what dying felt like. Or perhaps he was already dead? Regardless, Naruto knew he had defeated Kagaya and that was the only thing that mattered to him. However, his victory was not without obvious consequences, considering after his final clash Naruto was almost positive that he had died along with both Kagaya and Sasuke. Kurama? Naruto called out weakly, hoping his partner was somewhere nearby. However, after only a brief moment of silence, Naruto closed his blue eyes and took a small sigh. I guess this is where my story ends. Naruto mumbled in a soft and defeated tone, while he slightly cursed his luck. I'm sorry I let everyone down. The young hero finished, as he thought back to his friends and family. Knowing he was going to die without completing any of his promises or dreams. Though oddly enough, Naruto suddenly felt something strange touch his chest. A sensation that filled him with warmth, but most importantly was a spark that quickly moved its way throughout his body and reignited the feeling back to his body. What's going on? Naruto began softly, as his eyes opened wide to gaze into a giant blinding light hovering above him. Okay, why? A muffled and hardly audible voice called out, one that filled Naruto with curiosity and hope that his situation was about to change. Is someone there? Naruto called back loudly, while the light began to grow brighter and brighter. Oh please God. The voice from before began, and this time Naruto was able to identify much more than before. Since now he could clearly hear the voice of what sounded to be a woman talking to him. Save this man? Who are you? Naruto asked, while he could hardly see due to the blinding light now obscuring his vision. You talked. The voice chirped in a mixture of astonishment and excitement. Naruto was confused, but before he could say anything he felt his entire body jerk upwards. Then, what could only be described as the force of a mountain being crushed down upon him, he laid motionless against the ground. However, riddled with pain, Naruto could instantly tell multiple things. For starters, he could feel pain. Which sucked, but is better than being dead in his book. Second, he could feel himself laying on the hard ground, which again is an improvement from an endless void. However, most notable was the symphony of sounds that reached his ears. Some were familiar, like the chirping of birds and the howling of the wind, but other sounds were foreign to him. So finally opening his eyes, Naruto noticed he was in an alleyway, but he wasn't alone. Considering the most beautiful woman he had ever met was currently hovering over him with worry in her eyes. She was a young girl around the same age as his own if he were to make assumptions. She had long blonde hair that cascaded down her slender frame and a pair of gorgeous green eyes. Both of which were currently scanning Naruto from head to toe. However, what caught Naruto's immediate attention were her breasts, which were practically pressed into Naruto's face regardless of the strange black robe the girl was wearing. My name is Aurora Argento. The now named Aurora began in a kind and friendly tone. Who are you? Can I help you? Naruto smiled at the girl's almost instant need to help him, but before he could say anything his eyes grew heavy, and before he knew what was happening he drifted into unconsciousness. Naruto's mindscape, jerking upward, Naruto was greeted with the all-too-familiar sight that was the sewer inside his mind. However, that wasn't the only thing Naruto found, as gazing down upon him with a cocky smirk was his partner and friend Kurama. It's good to see you, kid. Kurama bellowed in a gruff, but otherwise pleased voice. Kurama. Naruto shouted in both joy and confusion. I'm so happy to see you, but what the hell happened? Did we really defeat Kagaya? Well, for starters, you and that disgraceful Uchiha defeated Kagaya, but it wasn't without the cost of your own lives. Well, to be more exact, the cost of your friend's life. Kurama explained in a simple tone, while Naruto simply tilted his head in confusion. A response that made Kurama huff. The backlash from your Sasuke and Kaguya's final clash literally tore a hole in our dimension. As such, Kagaya died and you along with Sasuke floated inside an empty void. But I'm obviously not now. What happened? Where is Sasuke? Kurama sighed. I watched everything from inside your body. Your friend used the eyes the sage of six paths gave him to speak with me inside your mind, much like he did at Orochimaru's old base. He figured the only way to escape your predicament was to use both halves of the old man's chakra to escape your situation. So he removed his eyes and placed them in your body and asked me to take over and get you to safety. Naruto held his hands out in protest. But why would Sasuke do that? Naruto asked in a pain-filled voice, as just the idea of his friend doing such a sacrifice for him made him sick. Why would he throw his dreams and ambitions away to save me? We could have worked together to escape. Kurama closed his eyes. I've done horrible things and I've been lost for years. I have been consumed by hatred constantly and I'm ready to be with my brother. If my only and last good deed is spent saving this idiot, then I'm okay with that. I know he can create a world that Itachi would be proud of. Kurama began, as he glanced down to his partner with a hard gaze. Those were the final words of Sasuke Uchiha before he gifted you his eyes and died. From there I did everything I could to keep you alive and also saved you from the empty void you were trapped in. Naruto clutched his chest, as he thought over the last words of his best friend. They had a strained relationship, but in the end Sasuke believed in him and sacrificed everything for that faith. So what part of the elemental nations are we in now? Naruto asked, as he looked up to the massive fox. From the brief moment I was awake I could tell I wasn't in Konoha. So where are we? About that kit? Kurama began in a low and slightly upset voice. We are no longer in the elemental nations. Hell, we aren't even in the same dimension, and before you even ask I have no clue where we are. But what about everyone back home? Are they okay? Can we get back? Naruto shouted loudly, but Kurama merely sighed. I don't know, kid, I honestly don't know. Kurama replied, which made Naruto drop his head sadly. But remember, you're not alone. We will get through this together, but in the meantime that woman who found you is waiting for you to awake. So we will talk later. Unknown location, being quickly flung from his mind and back into the real world. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and quickly found he was no longer in the alleyway from before. Instead he was tucked into an unfamiliar bed and the girl from before was seated on a stool at his bedside. You're awake again. Aurora cheered happily, while she tilted her head and gave a friendly eye smile. Aurora, right? Naruto asked in a slightly confused voice, which made the girl nod happily. Well, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and could you tell me where I am exactly? Nodding her head, Aurora stood to her feet. You're in Italy, or to be more exact, the city of Naples, unless you're talking about this house, which is my apartment in the city. The friendly blonde explained in a rather bubbly voice. Naruto absorbed the information he was given and took a moment to think. Considering he never heard of Italy or Naples for that matter, so it further proved he was no longer in his original dimension. Well, I thank you for everything you've done for me so far, Aurora. I am in your debt. Naruto spoke up, while he perched himself upwards and noticed he wasn't wearing a shirt. This of course displayed Naruto's chilled chest and abs, while Aurora blushed a deep shade of red. Where is my shirt? Well, it was all ripped up and I took it off to check if you had any injuries. Aurora explained in a rather nervous voice. So you found me and brought me back to your place to check my injuries? Naruto gathered together, which made the young blonde nod softly. Well, why didn't you just bring me to a hospital? There is hospitals in Naples, right? At this question Aurora tensed up slightly. Well, you were pretty beaten up and in an alleyway. So I figured you were somehow involved with the Passione in the city. So I was afraid to take you somewhere public, but I know God's plan involved me finding you. So I took you back to where I live so I could help you. Well, I'm not exactly from around here and I have no clue what the Passione is. Naruto admitted in an honest tone, which made Aurora sigh in relief. But I'm grateful for what you've done for me so far, don't mention it, Naruto. Aurora replied in a happy voice, while she turned away and started to leave the room. But you must be hungry. So stay right there and I'll get you something to eat. Naruto watched Aurora walk off with a smile and slightly reclined back into the bed he was in, while he allowed his eyes to observe his surroundings. Noticing Aurora's apartment was rather small and reminded the blonde of his own apartment in Konoha minus the mess. So it made Naruto wonder if his newly made acquaintance lived on her own. Hey Kurama. Naruto spoke softly to himself. What is it? The powerful nine-tailed fox asked. What do you think we should do first? Naruto asked. Well, we know we are in a city called Naples that is located in Italy, which is most likely the country we are in. Also, this girl does speak our language, which is beneficial for us and saves us from having to deal with any annoying speech barriers. I say for now stick close to this Aurora girl and gather as much information as possible. I doubt we can return to our dimension anytime soon if ever. So you should start adjusting to our new setting. Naruto nodded, as it sounded like a reasonable plan. Besides, the blonde was starting to like Aurora, as he could feel her emotions were genuine kindness that he hadn't seen from very many people. I'm back, Aurora announced, while she walked over with a cup of instant ramen in her hands. I hope you don't mind ramen. I am not much of a cook and I really don't belong in a kitchen. Though I can make one mean instant ramen, are you kidding? Ramen is the food of the gods. Naruto shouted in a giddy voice, as he would never pass up on his favorite food. Aurora laughed softly and handed Naruto the cup of noodles, which the blonde practically consumed instantly. Well, Naruto, you never told me what you were doing unconscious in that alleyway in the first place. Aurora pointed out, while she reclaimed her seat beside the blonde. Choking on his noodles, Naruto silently cursed to himself, as he didn't really know what to tell the girl. Lucky for Naruto, he had a helpful voice within his mind. Tell her you recently moved to Naples and got mugged and lost all your things. Well, I've been wanting to move to Naples, but when I got here I got mugged and lost all my stuff. Naruto lied, as it was easier than saying he jumped dimensions with the power of a sage after fighting the mother of the same sage. Oh, you poor thing, God bless you. Aurora began in a truly concerned voice, while she reached out and grabbed onto Naruto's wrist. You can stay with me for as long as you need. Naruto grinned wide at Aurora's kindness. That would be awesome, Aurora-chan. Aurora smiled wide. Then it is settled, you will stay with me, and in the meantime I can show you around the city and even get you some actual clothes. Naruto chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. Sounds like a plan to me, Aurora. Well, after you're done eating we can get some sleep since it's getting pretty late out. Aurora explained in a carefree voice, while Naruto looked away from the girl into his ramen. Completely unaware to the girl who was currently stripping down into her bra and panties. Well, where are you going to sleep? Naruto began but stopped with his jaw dropped when he noticed Aurora standing completely in her underwear with an innocent smile on her face. With you, of course, silly. Aurora declared to the stunned blonde. There is only one bed after all. Naruto's eyes grew increasingly wide, while the roaring of Kurama's laughter echoed throughout his mind. Make that perverted teacher of yours proud, brat. Kurama yelled loudly. A few days later, it has been a couple days since Naruto had stumbled his way into the life of Aurora Argento and began his new life in Naples. Since then, Naruto had learned a few things about this new world he was in and, more importantly, the girl who had found him and taken him in. Apparently, Aurora had been an orphan her entire life, much like Naruto, but she eventually reached the age of 18 and began to live on her own. Despite her loneliness, Naruto found the girl to be incredibly kind and caring and liked to spend her free time volunteering in orphanages and homeless shelters. Currently, the duo were walking around Naples with the goal of familiarizing Naruto with the area and finding a possible job to support himself. However, as they walked, the duo got many jealous looks from both men and women. Considering Naruto was now wearing a tight yellow shirt and a simple pair of tan joggers, while Aurora was wearing a fairly modest black shirt and matching shorts. Though the real kicker was how Aurora had her arms wrapped around Naruto's own as she led him throughout the city. Over there is a great bistro if you want a nice dinner, but it's owned by the Passione. And that way leads to a large market for some fresh fish and other produce. Then in that direction is where the local church I attend is. Aurora explained in a giddy voice, as she constantly pointed Naruto in multiple directions. It's a lovely city, Naruto commented before looking up to the bright blue sky. It's different from where I grew up, but I could see myself staying here. Aurora grinned from ear to ear. And you haven't even seen the best parts yet, and I'm sure you'll show me everything Naples has to offer. Naruto replied back with a soft laugh that Aurora shared. But I'm curious, Aurora. Naruto began, as he ignored the numerous jealous looks he was getting from passing by men. I've spent a few days with you and I still haven't learned all that much about you. So why don't you tell me more about yourself? Ya know, like your likes, dislikes and hobbies. Aurora placed her free hand to her chin and thought over Naruto's idea. Sure, the girl began before pointing back at the blonde with a grin. Only if you tell me about yourself in return, that's fair enough. Naruto replied. Well, I like God, cooking and you. I dislike those who prey on the weak or commit horrible actions in the name of God. My dreams are to find the love of my life and finally have a family to call my own. That and spread as much love and kindness in the name of God to the world that I can. I even want to one day move to the Vatican City in official join and work for the church." Naruto smiled, as Aurora had a wonderful set of dreams for the future. "Well, I like training, ramen and my precious people. I dislike the time it takes to cook ramen and people who only want to cause destruction. My dream is to one day finally make my master's dream of world peace a reality. Then maybe get a family of my own along the way." "Your master?" Aurora asked, as she had no knowledge of anything involving Naruto's old life. "Yeah, his name was Jiraiya and he was a huge pervert, but he taught me everything I know and was the closest thing I had to a father before he was killed," Naruto explained, which caused Aurora to drop her head in sadness. "I'm sorry to hear that." Naruto waved the girl off, as he had worked past the death of Jiraiya. "It's okay, I miss the old pervert, but losing him helped me grow even further as a person. You know, brat, not a single person has ever heard of your perverted master in this dimension or his books. You could plagiarize the living hell out of his books and make a killing. I mean, your master managed to make quite the killing off those books, so why not do the same?" Hearing the idea of the fox inside his head, Naruto pondered over the idea. Considering it wasn't an awful idea, but it did run the risk of Naruto turning into a major pervert like Jiraiya was. "I'll think about it," Naruto replied back in his mind, but was quickly snapped back to reality once he held Aurora gripped tightly onto Naruto's arm. He then felt the girl's emotions spike with a mixture of worry and fear. "Aurora," Naruto began, while he glanced down to the girl and could tell she was shaken. So reaching out, he brought her body closer to his, which slightly calmed the girl. "Are you okay, Passione?" the girl whispered softly, while her green eyes focused on three goons walking right in their direction. Meanwhile, the surrounding area was quickly clearing at the mere sight of the three individuals. "Well, what do we have here, boys?" one of the gangsters spoke up, while he looked directly at Aurora with a sleazy grin. "If I wasn't mistaken, I would say it's the local high and mighty church girl. I think you're right. She's so busy worshipping her pretend god." Another goon spoke up, while tugging on his groin. "Well, I got something real for you to worship." Aurora was absolutely appalled by the men's remarks and she slowly retreated behind Naruto, the latter of whom balled his fists, as he didn't appreciate what any of the strangers were saying. "Why don't you ditch that loser can come have some fun with us?" the third member of the group proposed, while he motioned for Aurora to walk over to him with his finger. Aurora shuddered, but she quickly thought over her current situation. These individuals were all members of a notorious gang in Italy, meaning they were capable of awful things. Worst of all, if she didn't comply to their wishes, Naruto could be placed in danger and she didn't want that. So the young woman was about to step forward and give herself up. However, before she could move, Naruto spoke up. "I'll give you one chance to apologize to Aurora and walk away." Naruto began in a firm and confident tone, while his blue eyes hardened and he stood protectively in front of Aurora. "If not, I won't feel sorry for what happens to you." The three goons began to laugh and one even revealed a large pocket knife that made Aurora gasp. "How about you fuck off, asshole?" the goon in the middle shouted, while he took one step forward. However, before his second foot could even move, Naruto was suddenly in his face with a finger held to his forehead. "I tried to warn you." Naruto sighed, while he flicked the man with enough force to send him barreling down the street unconscious. Taken by surprise, the goon with the knife tried to stab Naruto, but Naruto grabbed the blade and snapped the weapon in two. Then without remorse, Naruto punched his second attacker in the chest, sending him straight into a water canal that was nearby. Finally, the last goon pulled out a small handgun and took quick aim at Naruto. "Die, you stupid fucker," the Passione yelled, while he fired multiple shots directly at Naruto, the latter of whom merely looked at the man with a blank expression before holding his fist out to the man. Then with a dead stare, Naruto opened his hand and every single bullet fell out of his hands and bounced onto the ground. "Don't say I didn't warn you," Naruto mumbled, while he gave the man a swift and powerful chop to the neck, knocking him unconscious in a single blow. Aurora stood in awe and looked directly at the unharmed blonde. From what he told her, Naruto was mugged on his first day in Naples, but here he was fighting like some kind of unstoppable force. Hell, he flicked someone so hard then rolled down an entire street and he caught multiple bullets fired at him from point-blank range. This of course made Aurora begin to think there was much more to her new friend, Aurora. Naruto spoke up softly, which grabbed the girl's attention and made her look forward. Noticing Naruto was slowly walking back to her side. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but you didn't get mugged when you first came to Naples, did you?" Aurora began in a critical tone, while she looked the blonde up and down. "There is no way I could believe that after what I just saw." Naruto rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. "Yeah, you're right about that. Hey, sorry for not telling the full truth. Well, could you tell me the truth now?" Aurora asked softly. "It's a long story, but I guess I can trust you." "That's if you want to listen about the tale of Naruto Uzumaki." Aurora nodded. "Of course. I want to know more about you, Naruto." Smiling wide, Naruto suddenly scooped Aurora into his arms, which made the girl blush a deep shade of red. "Well, why don't we go somewhere more private?" Naruto purposed before. To Aurora's surprise, he took a massive leap onto the city rooftops before jumping back towards Aurora's home. "Then I can tell you about my life and where I am really from." 3 years later, 3 years have gone by since Naruto had began his life in Naples with Aurora, but things could not be better for the blonde from another dimension. Considering not many months after Naruto shared his true past with Aurora, the two quickly fell in love and even a year prior got married, which resulted in Aurora taking the last name Uzumaki. However, long before their official marriage, the two did have a child out of wedlock. A boy by the name of Giorno Uzumaki, who took mostly after his father in looks and his mother in personality and had just turned 3 years old. However, that was not their only child of the Uzumaki family. Considering Aurora was pregnant and was due to give birth within the next few weeks to a girl. Aurora was ecstatic to finally have a girl and had already decided upon the name of Asia. This of course filled Naruto with incredible amounts of joy, and even if he could find a way to return home, he was at the point where he wanted to stay with his new family. So he stopped trying to find ways to return to his old dimension almost 3 years ago, around the birth of his first child. Currently the young family was in their new and larger home outside of Naples that was further into the countryside. Considering with the growth of their family along with the wealth Naruto was making off writing new versions of Icha Icha Paradise based off his and Aurora's life together, the family was quite well off. Aurora herself was busy rocking Giorno on a small wooden rocking chair, while she quietly worked on knitting a pink blanket for Asia. Meanwhile, Naruto was off to the side writing a new chapter for his next book, but he couldn't help himself from stopping and looking to his wife and son. "You know, I didn't become Hokage and my life didn't go the way I planned, but I wouldn't change a single thing." Naruto mused within his own thoughts, while a gruff voice chuckled in response. "You've done well for yourself, brat. Your parents and teachers would be proud." Kurama replied softly. "You know, I wonder if I should start training Giorno and eventually Asia. They should have chakra thanks to me, but something is off with both of them. I can feel something inside of Giorno and even Asia. It's a power that neither I or Aurora have, and I'm curious to what it is. Perhaps some training would do some good, and we could even discover the anomaly within your children. Considering I feel the power you speak of as well. Maybe it's something to do with this world? After all, there is still so much neither of us know about this dimension. Hey honey." Aurora suddenly spoke up, which made the blonde look up to his wife and take a hold on his inner dialogue. "What's the matter, Aurora?" Naruto asked, as he could see the obvious discomfort on Aurora's face. "Asia is coming." Aurora yelled loudly, which made Naruto leap out of his chair in surprise. "Shit." The father cursed in response. "Shit." Giorno mimicked happily as he clapped his hands together. Aurora glared at her husband with a death glare he didn't know a kinder-hearted spirit like her could make. "Get me to the hospital before I send you to God to repent for your sins," Aurora ordered in a stern voice. "You don't have to tell me twice," Naruto replied before making an all-too-familiar hand sign and created a clone to grab Giorno, while he picked Aurora up in his arms. "Let's get going." "Shit, shit, shit," Giorno repeated happily, which caused Aurora to growl and smack her husband as he carried her off to the hospital. 12 years later, 12 years have passed since Asia was born and the growth of the Uzumaki family had stopped, as Aurora and Naruto didn't want any more children at the moment. However, in the past 12 years the Uzumaki has changed greatly. Naruto was now currently 32 and had kept his young muscular physique, but his hair had grown much longer to mimic his old teacher Jiraiya. Naruto felt this was fitting as the man's books helped propel Naruto into becoming the most successful author in the world. So keeping his hair in this fashion was a way for Naruto to pay tribute to the man. However, Naruto's fame wasn't the only thing that had risen over the years. Considering he trained daily and was now at a point where he would be considered a god in his previous dimension and even more so in his current home. Next came Giorno, who was now 15 and had grown into a young and ambitious young man. One who values his family and those around him, which were traits he obviously inherited from both his parents. Then there was Asia, who was now 12 and was practically a carbon clone of her mother in both personality and looks. However, she did have a small spark of Naruto's goofy and mischievous behavior sprinkled into her. Finally there was Aurora Uzumaki, who had perished when she stumbled across a drug deal gone south within the city only a week ago. This event devastated the entire Uzumaki family and explained why the 3 remaining members of the family were all standing over Aurora's grave in mourning. Naruto balled his fists, as he felt the same feelings of hurt and suffering as when he lost Jiraiya. The blonde could even hear the words of Nagato echoing throughout his mind. Justice comes from vengeance, but that justice only brings more vengeance. Naruto wanted to find those responsible and make them pay for taking his wife and mother of his children from him. However, he knew that wasn't a route he could take. Instead, he merely glanced down to his children. Asia was sobbing at the loss of her mother, and who could blame her? Giorno on the other hand had a hard and determined look on his face. This world filled with hate, drugs, pain and sin. The eldest of the Uzumaki children began softly, while he gripped his fists and tears rolled down his cheeks. Something as foolish as disputes over drugs cost the life of a true saint in this world. That's inexcusable and is why I will join the Passione. I will climb the ranks and demolish the origination from the ground up. Then I will rebuild that organization and use it as a tool to change this city and world for the better. Just like Ka-chan would have wanted. Naruto was surprised by his eldest son, but closed his eyes and smiled softly at his conviction. As it truly was the best way to honor Aurora and avenge her death. I have more power than any man could dream of. Naruto began softly, while he brought both of his children in for a one-armed hug. However, I will take over the Passione and use it as an organization to honor Aurora's ideals and dreams. And I will protect you too with everything I have. That's my promise and I never go back on my promise. 1 year later, 1 year has gone by since Aurora's death and Naruto's promise to take over Passione. A goal which Naruto accomplished in only a few weeks, as with his near godlike abilities, not a single person posed any sort of challenge to his power whatsoever. That of course meant for the last year Naruto had been operating as the new boss of the Passione and was working to make the organization more in line with Aurora's ideals of bettering humanity. He started with eliminating all illegal activities and removed anyone who disagreed with his new vision of the gangster organization. It was a rough start at first, but with some help from his newly appointed and trusted capos. The Passione has made great strides in bettering the country of Italy and slowly reaching out into other nations and cities. However, the Passione still kept a firm grasp on their power to better uphold the peace that Naruto was trying to create. Though at this time Naruto was within his office and overlooking his top 2 men. One which was his son Giorno, but the other was another young man by the name of Bruno Bucciarati. Both of whom were waiting silently at their leader's desk. So have the preparations been set? Naruto asked in a strong and commanding voice. Bruno nodded and took a slight bow. Yes boss, Abacchio has the target with him and is secured. Meanwhile Narancia and Mista have all the preparations set. Naruto nodded with a pleased expression and turned to his eldest child. And what about the package? Giorno nodded. I managed to obtain the package this morning father. Excellent work boys. Naruto praised with a goofy grin, while he was practically shaking with excitement. Asia is going to love her surprise 13th birthday party. Yes that's right. Naruto Uzumaki, arguably the most powerful individual alive and the leader of the most expansive and powerful organization, was using his abilities and resources to plan a preteen birthday party and as Kurama would say, once a dumbass always a dumbass. Giorno Uzumaki was currently alone with his father Naruto Uzumaki in his father's private study. Bruno had just recently left to help with the final preparations for Asia's birthday party. while Giorno had stayed behind to speak with his father. However, neither father or son was doing much talking, as Giorno was watching his father move his fingers along a large bookcase he had acquired from the previous boss of the Passione after killing the man and taking his organization. Though while Naruto rummaged through the bookcase, Giorno took notice to his father's appearance. Naruto had his long spiky hair tied back into a massive ponytail, while he wore a rather elegant slim black suit that was left unbuttoned to reveal a small amount of his chest. However, what really got Giorno was his father's face, which was not the face of a man in his early 30s, but instead Naruto appeared to be in his 20s. This was mainly due to his Uzumaki heritage helping slow his aging process and giving him a younger appearance. Now where is that book at? Naruto grumbled in a slightly annoyed tone as he rubbed his chin. Father, can I help you with what you're looking for? Giorno asked respectfully, while he stood before his father's desk. Naruto waved his son off without turning to his direction. No, that's okay Giorno, but thanks for offering to help. Giorno frowned softly and studied his father, as he slowly noticed a shift in his father once the man took over the Passione. He first attributed this strange behavior to the loss of his wife and Giorno's mother Aurora finally taking its toll. Considering he no longer had the driving force of taking over the Passione to distract him. However, that didn't seem like what was wrong and made Giorno wonder what was really wrong with his father. Are you sure there isn't anything I can help you with, father? Giorno asked, while he took a slight step towards his father. Or maybe we could just talk. Do you have anything on your mind? Naruto smiled softly and turned to his eldest child and slowly walked over to the boy before resting a hand on his shoulder. Everything is fine, Giorno. I can sense your emotions and there is no need to worry about anything. Naruto began softly, while displaying his trademark and infectious grin to his son. I'm just doing a bit of research that's been bugging me recently, but it's not that important. What is important is little Asia's birthday party. So why don't you head down to the bistro and make sure everything is ready? After all, I don't fully trust Narancia and Mista to not mess things up some way. Giorno chuckled at his father's remark. Yes, they can be idiots at times, but I'll go make sure everything is ready for Asia. Naruto nodded. You're a good brother and son, Giorno. You make me very proud. The boss of the Passione declared before giving his son a strong hug. Returning the hug, Giorno smiled. Thank you, father. Naruto backed away with a proud grin and watched his son leave his office. Then as the door to Naruto's office closed, the blonde sighed and looked up. We have some good kids, Aurora. Naruto mumbled softly, while he slowly walked back to the bookcase he was searching through. Quickly grinning wide as he found the particular book he was searching for. There you are. Next, without wasting any time, Naruto dashed over to his desk and began to read through the book. Then for the next 10 minutes he began to skim his way through each page, while absorbing as much information as he possibly could. Meanwhile, his facial features shifted from interest to surprise to ultimately a look of displeasure. I don't like what this could imply. Naruto began softly, while his hands were folded and his blue eyes glared down onto the book left open on his desk. This is quite unexpected. Kurama pointed out in a gruff tone, while Naruto simply nodded. However, what could have the father of Asia and Giorno in such a sour mood? Well, the explanation links back to when Naruto took over the Passione almost a year ago. During that time, Naruto had finally got a glimpse of the power that was inside of his eldest child Giorno. At the time, Naruto didn't understand what the power was, but knew it was some ability that allowed Giorno to convert inorganic objects into living organisms. A strange and bizarre ability that Naruto didn't know the origin of at first. Meanwhile, Asia showed uses of her own power, which was some miraculous healing ability that would make Sakura and even Tsunade envious. However, once Naruto made his way to the top of Passione, he discovered these were called sacred gears, which were also known as God's artifacts. These were items with powerful abilities bestowed onto humans by the god Aurora always talked about. Apparently the former boss of the Passione had an obsession with them, which showed with all the books and journals Naruto had acquired from the man. This of course meant Giorno in Asia along with a majority of Naruto's top capos all are in possession of these powerful artifacts. Though even more importantly, Naruto was now learning that God was real and not just God, but also devils, angels, fallen angels and every other race he could find information on was. Though this revelation wasn't what troubled Naruto, as what really made him upset was that he had never seen anything besides a human and he feared what these groups could have on his vision for creating a world of peace. Considering the former leader of Passione had a decent amount of information on these groups and Naruto didn't like a majority of what her found. As all the supernatural groups he found information on seemed to be incredibly powerful and at odds with one another, while humanity was simply stuck in the middle of everything. So it made his dream of a peace-filled world slightly more complicated. Perhaps I should seek some of these groups out? Naruto mumbled, while speaking to the fox inside his mind. Determine if they are a threat or could become potential allies. According to Diavolo's research, he had only found individuals with sacred gears and had no contact with any supernatural groups. However, he never sought after them like he did with the scared gears. So they are surely real. Well, let's think over this, Naruto. You've been playing things safe since you arrived in this dimension. You never train your techniques outside of spars in your mind with me and you only train your physical body with workouts. This is probably why no group has found you, as for the most part you've done a good job at flying under the radar. But this wasn't intentional. I wasn't hiding from all these supernatural groups. I was just trying to ensure nobody placed any unwanted attention on me and my family. Naruto shot back in a plain voice. I know, but this places us in a good position, Naruto. I doubt these groups know anything about you. So it allows us to gather information and act on how we see fit. I say we use some of your high-ranking capos to gather intel on different factions and go from there. That could be a good plan. I'll speak with Giorno and the rest after Asia's party. Naruto mumbled softly while he closed the book and stood to his feet, making his way out of his office and towards the location of Asia's surprise party. With Asia, kneeled in prayer with her hands clasped together and pressed to her chest. The youngest of the Uzumaki family was currently before her mother's grave and spending some time in prayer with her deceased mother. This was of course something Asia had started doing on special occasions like birthdays or anniversaries, as it allowed the girl to feel close to her mother in some fashion. Watching the girl with a protective gaze was one of her father's most trusted subordinates, Leone Abbacchio. The latter of whom had his hands in his pockets and was standing quietly a few feet away from the girl. I'm sorry, Lady Asia. The gangster began softly, while he noticed the girl remained in prayer. I don't wish to rush you, but we do need to get moving. Asia remained silent for another brief moment, but eventually uttered an Amen, before standing to her feet and turning to Abbacchio. No need for apologies, big brother, the young blonde replied with a kind smile, while showing how she treated the gangster like an elder sibling instead of her father's subordinate. In fact, Asia had a close sibling relationship with all of her father's top capos. However, these relationships never undermined her relationship with her blood brother Giorno, who she loved just as much as her father. Abbacchio sighed and lowered his head, while walking away and motioning for Asia to follow him. He would never admit it, but he enjoyed having Asia treat him like a sibling. Though the gangster would rather die than admit that to anyone, especially someone like Mista, Fugo or Narancia. Hey big brother. Asia called out while she ran right beside the man. You never told me where we are going today after visiting Mom. Abbacchio glanced down to Asia with a slight smirk. I know, the gangster replied while he and Asia left the main gateway of the cemetery. Then as he looked forward without speaking again, it made Asia pout and look up. Well, are you gonna tell me where we are going? The daughter of the most powerful man alive asked. Nope. Abbacchio answered without even looking to Asia. Why not? Asia whined sadly, while her eyes began to water and she looked at the side of her protector's face. Noticing the man was starting to sweat, the boss told me not to. Abbacchio replied simply, while trying his hardest to avoid eye contact with Asia. Considering she possessed a power that even her father couldn't defeat. The all-powerful, puppy dog eyes. Please tell me, big brother Abbacchio. Asia begged, while she reached out and tugged on Abbacchio's arm. I cannot, Lady Asia. Abbacchio stuttered nervously. The boss gave me an order and I must obey without question. Asia huffed and folded her arms. But do you always have to follow Daddy's orders? Lady Asia, I owe everything including my life to your father. I will follow his orders without question and serve him until the day I die. Abbacchio began with conviction in his voice that surprised Asia, as she had never heard words like this from the man. My dream and ambition is to follow the boss and protect him and everyone he holds dear. I won't rest until his vision for a better world is achieved. Asia smiled softly at how much respect Abachio held for her father, which displayed just how amazing Naruto truly was. You know, Abachio, I have a dream as well. Asia declared softly, while she looked up into the sky. I want to follow my mom's dream and move to the Vatican City and join the church to serve God. Abachio glanced down to Asia and smiled softly at how innocent and kind the youngest Uzumaki was. That's an admirable dream, Lady Asia. But I don't think the boss would allow you to run off and join the church. You know how protective he is over you and even Giorno. Abachio pointed out, which made Asia slump over sadly. I know, but I'm hoping to convince Daddy to let me join the church soon. I think if I talk things out with him he will allow me to pursue my dream. Abachio pondered over Asia's words, while the duo slowly approached the bistro owned by the Passione. The same bistro where Asia's surprise birthday party would be held. However, as the two approached they could clearly see both Narancia Girga and Panikata Fugo, both of whom were top capos in Naruto's organization. Asia, seeing the two individuals, waved happily and began to run in their direction. Narancia. Fugo. Asia yelled in an upbeat voice, which caught both gangsters off guard. Lady Asia. Fugo yelled in surprise, while he watched the girl stop before him. Why, you're here early? Abachio sighed and rubbed the back of his head. Damn it, I got us here too quick. My bad. Fugo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It's okay, Abachio, we can adjust our plans slightly. Asia tilted her head just a little and looked up to Narancia with her infamous and dreaded, puppy dog eyes. This of course made the young gangster smile wide at Asia's look. Narancia, can you tell me what's going on? Asia asked in a sweet voice, while Abachio and Fugo's eyes grew wide. Please, big brother. Oh, we are setting up your birthday surprise. Narancia began before he was silenced by Fugo, the latter of whom grabbed Narancia's face and began to dig his fingers into his comrade's cheeks and mouth. You shit for brain moron. Fugo yelled loudly, while he slammed Narancia's head into a nearby light post. The boss wanted this as a surprise for Lady Asia, dumbass. Abachio grumbled softly. I spent all day keeping this a secret and you cave in 3 seconds. If the boss or Giorno doesn't kill you, I will. Asia quickly held her hands up with a worried expression. Don't be mad at Narancia. I shouldn't have asked in the first place. Please don't hurt Narancia and I'll pretend to be completely surprised. Fugo glared at Narancia before looking to Asia and sighing. Considering the girl's worried expression was enough to calm his anger. Alright, Lady Asia, if that's what you wish. Fugo replied softly, while letting his grip on Narancia go. Landing onto the ground and shaking himself to regain his composure, Narancia looked up to Asia with a wide smile. I'm sorry, Lady Asia. The young delinquent apologized, which made Asia nod in response. It's all forgiven, big brother, as long as you tell me what present I got for my birthday. Asia replied in a sweet voice, oh, you got. Narancia began, but was silenced by Abachio's foot in his face. Stop talking, dumbass. Abachio ordered in a stern voice while also looking at Asia. And Lady Asia, please stop taking advantage of this idiot. Asia gave a friendly and innocent smile. I have no idea what you're talking about, big brother. Asia replied in a sly voice, as even though she was kind and sweet like her mother Aurora, Asia still inherited some of Naruto's trickster habits and personality. This of course caused Abachio to groan and roll his eyes at the girl's behavior. You know what, let's just go inside. The gangster began before pointing to Fugo and Narancia. You two run into the bistro and tell everyone to get ready because you see us coming. Fugo nodded and grabbed Narancia by the collar of his shirt before pulling him away and into the bistro. Then as the two disappeared into the restaurant, Abachio sighed and started to walk forward. Well, for that idiot Sake, I hope you're a good actor, Lady Asia. Abachio mumbled, as he slowly approached the door to the bistro and held the door open for Asia. Asia grinned wide and bowed in respect to Abachio for holding the door for her. I'm an Uzumaki, Abachio. There isn't anything I can't do. Abachio smirked and watched Asia walk into the dark bistro. However, after a few short steps the lights bust to life and Asia was quickly bombarded with a loud cheer and group of familiar faces. Surprise Asia. The collective members of the Passione yelled loudly, making the girl's eyes slightly water. Considering even though the surprise was ruined, she still appreciated the love and kindness taken for her sake. Everyone, you shouldn't have Asia began in a happy voice, while she looked around the room to her family and friends. Noticing her brother Giorno was smiling wide while his friends and fellow capos were standing beside him. This group consisted of Bruno Bucciarati, Narancia Girga, Panicotta Fugo and Guido Mista. Happy birthday baby sister. Giorno spoke up happily. I hope today is everything you want it to be. Bruno nodded with a slight smirk. We really got you with this surprise for a change. Mista nodded and laughed loudly. You have no idea how hard it was to keep this a secret. Narancia chuckled nervously and rubbed the back of his head. Yup, super hard. Hey, happy birthday Lady Asia. Fugo sent a small glare directed at Narancia. Yeah, happy birthday. Abbacchio smirked and ruffled Asia's hair before walking further into the bistro. This of course allowed the girl to see the rest of the passione and guests of the party. The first person she noticed was Trish Una, who was the previous boss's daughter and a current friend of Giorno and the new passione. I hope you like the present I got you, Asia. Trish spoke up with a small wink directed at the girl. However, as Asia's eyes wandered even more, she saw the most surprising group at attendance of her party. This being the infamous La Squadra, which was the assassin group of the Passione led by Risato Nero. Apparently her father had actually not only earned the respect of every single member of the group, but he had also taken them into his group of gangsters. This was mainly due to Naruto not being one to shy away from killing and assassination. Considering he was trained to be a shinobi who specialized in killing and assassination, so Naruto didn't have any problems with the group just as long as they didn't kill without good reason or motivation. Happy birthday. Risato spoke up slowly, while he relaxed at a table with the rest of his squad. All of whom sent a friendly wave to the daughter of their boss. Asia smiled and took a slight step forward, but before she could even move she was suddenly scooped into the loving arms of her father. Happy birthday my little angel. Naruto yelled happily, as he affectionately rubbed his cheek into Asia's own. Asia giggled and wrapped her arms around her father's neck. Hee, thank you for the party daddy. I love you so much. Naruto was beaming with joy as he held tightly onto his precious daughter. And I love you my little angel. How was your day with Abbacchio? Asia grinned with a smile to match her father's. It was wonderful. Abbacchio took me out for gelato and then we went to go see mom. I'm glad you had a good day, but I have something special to show you. Naruto declared as he quickly placed Asia back onto the ground. So wait right here and I'll go fetch it for you. Asia watched her father dash away and smiled to everyone around her. She had no friends her own age, but through the Passione she had 13 older brother figures and 1 older sister figure. The Passione was her family and she loved every single one of them and they loved her in return. Asia. Giorno began softly, while he approached the girl and bent over to give her a hug. Abbacchio told me you went to go see mother. I'm sorry I didn't go with you. Asia giggled and hugged her older brother back. It's okay Giorno. No need to apologize for something like that. Giorno backed away with a smile and playfully ruffled Asia's hair. You're so sweet and kind Asia. You're just like mother. Hee, so are you Giorno. Asia giggled loudly while she tilted her head innocently. I'm back, Naruto declared in a loud voice, while he ran back to Asia with a wrapped gift in his hands. Asia looked to her father with a curious look, as the gift was rectangular in shape and looked to be about the same size as a book. Is that my gift from you daddy? Naruto nodded with a goofy grin and handed the gift over to Asia. The latter of whom accepted the gift with a skeptical look. Yup, and you're gonna love it. Asia felt the gift and confirmed through the wrapping paper that it was in fact a book. So considering who her father was, this made Asia slightly nervous. Daddy, this isn't one of your perverted books, is it? Naruto quickly held his hands up. No, it's nothing like that. The father quickly defended, as ever since Asia learned about Naruto's Icha Icha paradise she had labeled her father as a pervert. However, despite that she still loved him the same as she did before. Oh, that's good. Asia sighed in relief. I was sure you were trying to turn me into a pervert like you. Naruto slumped over at that remark from his daughter, knowing Jiraiya was laughing in the afterlife at his expense. Considering Naruto would always call the man a pervert and now the tables have turned on the leader of the Passione. Don't worry Asia. Giorno began as he leaned in with a smile. I won't let father corrupt you, but you really should open your gift. Asia nodded and began to open the wrapping around the gift. Her eyes growing wide as she noticed the gift was a Bible. However, this particular Bible was special above any others. Since this Bible had the name Aurora Argento embroidered onto the black leather cover, his is. Asia began slowly, while her voice hitched and her fingers ran over the cover of the holy book. Mom's Bible. Giorno smiled and watched his sister begin to slightly sob, as the particular Bible meant more to her than anything. Since that was the Bible their mother would read to them from almost every night. In fact, Asia's faith was instilled into her from Aurora, while Giorno never really took to the religion. Giorno had the idea to restore Aurora's old Bible and give it to you. Naruto explained, while he bent down and leaned into his daughter. I wanted to give you a pony, but Giorno's idea was better. I could still get the pony though. Asia clutched the book close to her chest and closed her eyes. I love it, the girl mumbled softly, while she felt even closer to her mother than ever. But I love you too even more. Naruto and Giorno both smiled at the small 13-year-old. They would give her the world if they could and would do anything to protect her smile. We love you too, Asia. Naruto began, while he stood to his feet and looked to Narancia. But it's time we finally get this party started for real. Narancia grinned and placed a CD into a boombox and a song began to play loudly throughout the bistro. This of course caused Naruto to walk forward and begin to dance, while Narancia, Fugo and Mista began to copy their boss as backup dancers. Asia watched her father with wide eyes, as it was torture for any child to see their parents act embarrassingly in public. However, this wasn't just any kind of torture. No, this was a torture dance. However, Asia wasn't like most children and quickly ran over to her father and began to poorly mimic his dance moves. This of course caused the father and daughter to share a glance, smile and ultimately a laugh. House of Gremory. Venelana Gremory was known for being the eldest daughter of the House of Bael and having the nickname of the brown-haired ruined princess. She was also known for her incredible power that matched her almost unending beauty. However, nowadays she was simply Venelana Gremory. The head of the Gremory family after her husband Zeoticus Gremory has fallen deathly ill and died a few years prior. Unfortunately, it appeared that her late husband managed to leave her in quite the sticky situation after his passing. This was due to a certain contract that Zeoticus had made with the head of the Phoenix family before his passing. I'm sorry, Rias. Venelana began softly, while the woman gazed over the contract within her grasp. This contract looks near unbreakable. Rias looked down with a disappointed look, as she knew as the future head of her family she would have to make sacrifices. She however didn't expect to be married off to a pompous ass like Riser Phoenix. But you're the head of the House of Gremory, mother. Can't you break the contract? Rias asked desperately. Venelana sighed and shook her head. Unfortunately, that power only resides with those who signed the contract, Rias. And since your father is dead, that power rests with Lord Phoenix and him alone. So I'm doomed to marry someone I don't love. Rias mumbled sadly, which made Venelana frown. I'm sorry, Rias, but don't give up. The marriage is years away and Circex might be able to help you in some way. Rias perked up with a small glimpse of hope, as not all was lost. You're right, mother. I can't give up yet. Venelana smiled at her daughter and began to walk off. Come, Rias, let's forget about this for now and go get something to eat. Naruto's office, sitting behind his desk with a neutral expression, Naruto looked around to his top capos. All of whom were standing in front of his desk and were waiting for him to speak. It was only an hour after Asia's party and Naruto had immediately called a meeting to talk to each man about their new objectives. Giorno. Naruto began, which made the boy stand straight with a fierce gaze. Giorno was Naruto's second in command and was the capo over eliminating the drug trade within Italy. However, where Giorno truly shines was in his combat abilities. Since he had been trained by his father to be a shinobi and possessed Jonin-level chakra, speed and strength. Giorno even knew some of his father's signature jutsus, making him very deadly in a fight. Though he also was in control of a scared gear called Golden Experience, which was a scared gear in the shape of gloves that can give life and transform objects. Bruno. Naruto continued, while he looked to the next capo under his power. Bruno was an interesting individual who was in charge of eliminating human trafficking. His sacred gear was called the Zipper Gauntlets, which were two gauntlets that grant the ability to form zip-like constructs on anything he strikes. Abachio. Naruto called out, making the man nod in recognition. Abachio was Naruto's man for eliminating police corruption and had the sacred gear replay screen. This allowed Abachio to create a screen that could play back people as long as he was near where the person was. Mista. Naruto moved on, which made the man salute his boss. Mista was responsible for all illegal weapon trade, which was ironic considering his sacred gear called Outlaw Ricochet. This was a gun that could fire bullets that could ricochet from anything around him and even bounce off the particles in the air. Narancia. Naruto spoke firmly, making the boy smile in response. Narancia was in charge of protecting the citizens under the Passione's protection. His sacred gear was called Red Sky Devil. This was an independent tiny plane that Narancia could control and even use to scan levels of carbon dioxide in the air. Fugo. Naruto named out, which made Fugo adjust the sleeve of his shirt. Fugo was responsible for recruitment and was the man to get past if you wanted into the Passione. He was in possession of a sacred gear called Toxic Phantom. This sacred gear was a remote-controlled cloud of poisonous gas that Fugo could use to kill his opponents from a distance. And finally Risato. Naruto finished, while he looked at the leader of his group of assassins. Risato's main job was to eliminate individuals who needed to be killed. Considering Naruto knew no matter what the world would always have men like Danzo, Madara and Diavolo. So having a group of elite assassins to take those kind of people out was beneficial. Risato's sacred gear is called Metallica and works by having tiny remote-controlled partials of iron that can enter an individual's bloodstream and do a number of things to someone once inside. I've called you here to talk about what I've discovered. Naruto began in a sour mood, while he folded his hands together. Going through Diavolo's research, I've learned much more about the sacred gears that all of you and a majority of the Passione have. However, I've also discovered that God, devils, angels, fallen angels and much more are all real. The entire room was slightly surprised, as none in the room was not one to really buy into religion. Are you serious, boss? Bruno asked, speaking for everyone present. Naruto nodded softly and closed his eyes. I've prepared everything I've gathered into copies using my shadow clones to debrief you all on what little I've learned. However, from here you all have new assignments within the organization. Bruno and Giorno, you two are responsible for learning everything about the underworld and devils. Fugo and Mista, you two will look into the fallen angels. Narancia and Abachio, I'm having you two responsible for gathering information on God and angels. Lastly Risato, I'm having you and La Squadra look into multiple different supernatural groups that are not as major as the first three. Father, why are we doing this? Giorno asked suddenly, while holding his hands out. We've never seen any of these groups. So why don't we just focus on bettering humanity? Because these groups could be a danger to the better world we want to create. So we need to gather intel and decide what action to take. Naruto explained in a matter-of-fact tone. Risato chuckled. So if they are hostile, are you saying we might have to fight God? Naruto nodded. Yes, there is a chance we might fight these groups if they are a threat. For the meantime, I don't want any of you making contact with any of these groups. Is that understood? Naruto asked, his voice and gaze giving a commanding tone that left no room for discussion. We understand, boss, and we won't let you down. Fugo spoke up, while taking a bow of respect. Abachio nodded with a smirk. If you want to pick a fight with angels and devils, I'll follow you into heaven and hell. The capo declared, which was a sentiment shared among the group. Hey boss. Narancia began, as he held his finger up. What are you going to be doing? Naruto smiled and relaxed back into his chair. I'll be using my clones to keep moving the Passione forward and pick up the holes left by you seven. Naruto explained, while he patted the stacks of folders on his desk. Each of you grab a folder and get reading. Since you each have a lot of work to do, each capo stepped forward and did as they were told. This caused Naruto to smirk and stand to his feet. Considering it was getting late and he had a nightly ritual that he needed to keep up on, I'll leave you boys to your assignments. Naruto declared before leaving the office. Asia's bedroom, laying in her large and elegant bed, Asia watched the door to her room open to reveal her father. The latter of whom quickly walked to her bedside with a grin on his face. Are you ready for bed, my little princess? Naruto asked softly, while he pulled the covers over top of Asia. Shaking her head, Asia gave her father a sweet eye smile. Nope, not yet. Naruto laughed and kissed his daughter's forehead. How about now? Asia shook her head happily. Almost, the girl chipped, which was odd for Naruto, considering he would always tuck Asia in and give her a good night kiss and that was it. So this raised the man's curiosity. What else do you need? Naruto asked. Well, I want to ask your blessing to do something. Asia revealed, which surprised Naruto. Anything for you. Naruto replied instantly. Asia grinned and slightly held herself up on her forearms. I want to join the church in the Vatican City and serve God. No. Naruto cut in sharply, tearing down his daughter's dreams and ambitions in one moment. Why not? Asia asked in a slightly hurt voice, as she wasn't used to Naruto telling her no. I've recently learned things that make me uneasy around the church, Asia. I also can't spend all my time watching over you and you never did any shinobi training like Giorno, so you can't protect yourself. Naruto explained in a matter-of-fact tone. That's not true. Asia yelled back firmly. I know the 3 basic academy jutsus and Giorno taught me wall and water walking. I even was going to try and work on some medical ninjutsu, and yet you still can't fight for yourself like Giorno can. Naruto pointed out, while taking a deep sigh. Why is this so important? You're a member of the church here in Naples. Asia looked down and traced the covers of her bed using her finger. Well, Mom always told me her dream was to join the church in the Vatican City and serve God. Well, it's my dream too, and since Mom never got to see that dream through, I will live that dream for the both of us. Asia then looked up with tears in her eyes. That broke Naruto's heart. Please Dad, let me do this. Don't crush my and Mom's dream. That was it. Asia had hit Naruto's 2 and only weaknesses. The first was mentioning Aurora, while the second was seeing Asia cry. If I let you do this, I have rules. Naruto began, which surprised Asia. I'll do anything, Dad. Naruto sighed and held a finger up. First, you will go by the name Asia Argento and never tell anyone you're my daughter. I'm a famous author, but more so I am the boss of the Passione. So that could make you a target for anyone wanting to get to me, understood? Asia replied, while Naruto held up another finger. Second, if you sense any danger at all, you will leave and contact me, Giorno or any of my capos immediately. Naruto instructed sternly. Okay, I can do that, but I'm just joining the church. Asia pointed out. Third, Naruto began, as he ignored Asia's comment. You will call me at least once a week. I'll call you twice a week. Asia declared, while she lunged into her father and hugged the man. Naruto slowly ran his hand through Asia's long and soft blonde hair. And finally, don't make me regret allowing you to do this. Don't worry, Daddy. The last thing I would want is to make you upset. Asia spoke up softly, while she tightened her hold onto her father. Naruto didn't say anything in response, but instead her just held onto his daughter. Thinking to himself that he promised to never seek vengeance, and even though he lost Jiraiya and Aurora, he has held onto his ideals. However, he knew Asia was his one exception. Considering if something were to befall his precious daughter, Naruto would tear apart both heaven and hell for retribution. Thanks for watching, guys.